vaults were reached by means of small goblin-driven carts that sped along the miniature train tracks to the bank's underground tunnels. Harry enjoyed the breakdown journey of the Weasley's vault, but felt dreadful, far worse than he had at Knockturn Alley when it was opened. There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside, and just one gold gallon. Mrs. Weasley felt right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. Harry felt even worse when they reached his vault. Aw, you shouldn't feel bad for having money that your parents left you. I mean, I kind of get it. It's like they have a lot of money, or they need money, and you have a lot of money kind of thing. But Harry felt even worse when they reached his vault. He tried to block the contents from view as he hastily shoved handfuls of coins into a leather bag. Back outside onto the marble steps, they all separated. Percy muttered vaguely about needing a new quill. Fred and George had spotted their friend from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were going to a second-hand robe shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking the Grangers off to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. We'll all meet at Flourish and Bulks in an hour to buy your school books, said Mrs. Weasley, setting off with Ginny. And not one step down Knockturn Alley, she shouted at the twins' retreating backs. Harry, Ron, and Hermione strolled off to the windy and cobbled street. The bags of gold and silver. The bag of gold, silver, and bronze jangling cheerfully in Harry's pocket was clambering to be spent, so he bought 3 large strawberry peanut butter ice creams, which they slurped happily as they wandered up the alley, examining the fascinating shop windows. Ron gazed longingly at a full set of cuddly cannon robes in the window of low-quality Quidditch supplies until Hermione dragged them off to buy ink and parchment next door. In Gamble and Jape's Wizarding joke shop, they met Fred, George, and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on Dr. Filibuster's famous wet start. No heat fireworks, and in a tiny junk shop full of broken wands, lopsided brass scales, and old cloaks covered in potion stains they found Percy deeply immersed in the small and deeply boring books called Prefects Who Gained Power, a study of Hogwarts prefects in their later careers. Ron read aloud off the back cover. That sounds fascinating. Go away, Percy snapped. Of course, he's very ambitious. Of course, he's very ambitious, Percy. He's got it all planned out. He wants to be Minister of Magic, Ron told Harry and Hermione in one undertone as they left Percy to it. An hour later, they headed for Flourish and Blots. They were by no means the only ones making their way to the bookshop. As they approached it, they saw to their surprise a large crowd jostling outside the doors, trying to get in. The reason for this was proclaimed by a large banner stretched across the upper windows. Rory Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We can actually meet him, Hermione squealed. I mean, he's written almost the whole book list. The crowd seemed to make up mostly of witches around Mrs. Weasley's age. A harassed-looking wizard stood at the door, saying, Calmly, please, ladies. Don't push, there. Mind the books now. Harry, Ron, and Hermione squeezed inside. A long line wound right to the back of the shop, where Lockhart was signing his books. They each grabbed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, and sneaked up the line to where the rest of the Weasleys were standing with Mr. and Mrs. Granger. Oh, there you are. Good, said Mrs. Weasley as she sounded breathless and kept patting her hair. We'll be able to see him in a minute. Lockhart came slowly into view, seated at the table surrounded by large pictures of his own face, all winking and flashing dazzling white teeth at the crowd. The real Lockhart was wearing robes of forget-me-not blue that exactly matched his eyes. His pointed wizard's hat was set at a jaunty angle on his wavy hair. A short, irritable-looking man was dancing around and taking photographs with a large black camera that emitted puffs of purple smoke with every blinding flash. Out of the way there, he snarled at Ron, moving back to get a better shot. This is for the Daily Prophet. Big deal, said Ron, rubbing his foot where the photographer had stepped on it. Lockhart heard him. He looked up and saw Ron, and then he saw Harry. He stared. Then he leapt to his feet. Positively shouted. He leapt to his feet and positively shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter!" The crowd parted, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seized Harry's arms, and pulled him to the front. The crowd burst into applause. Harry's face burned as Lockhart shook his hand for the photographer, who was clicking away madly, wafting thick smoke over the Weasleys. "Nice big smile," Harry said Lockhart through his own gleaming teeth. "Together you and I are worth the front page." When he finally let go of Harry's hands, Harry could hardly feel his fingers. He tried to sidle back over to the Weasleys, but Lockhart threw an arm around his shoulder and clambered him tightly to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, waiting for the quiet. "What an extraordinary moment this is. The perfect moment for me to make the little announcement I've been sitting on for some time. When young Harry here stepped into Flourish and Bolt today, he only wanted to buy my autobiography, which I shall happily present to him now, free of charge." The crowd applauded again. "He has no idea," Lockhart continued, giving Harry a little shake that made his glasses slip into the end of his nose, "that he would shortly be getting much, much more than my book, Magical Me, and he and his schoolmates will, in fact, be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure and pride in announcing that this September I will be taking up the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." The crowd cheered and clapped as Harry found himself being presented with an entire works of Lockhart. Staggering slightly under the weight, he managed to make his way out of the limelight to the edge of the room, where Ginny was standing next to her new cauldron. "You have these," he mumbled to her, tipping the books into the cauldron. "I'll buy my own." "Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter?" said a voice Harry had no trouble recognizing. He straightened up and found himself face to face with Draco Malfoy, who was wearing his usual sneer. "Famous Harry Potter," said Malfoy. "Can't even get into a bookshop without making the front page." "Leave him alone. He didn't want all that," said Ginny, and it was the first time she had spoken in front of Harry. She was glaring at Malfoy. "Potter, you must have got yourself a girlfriend," drawled Malfoy. Ginny went scarlet as Ron and Hermione fought their way over, both clutching stacks of Lockhart's books. "Oh, it's you," said Ron, looking at Malfoy as if he were something unpleasant on the sole of his shoe. "Bet you're surprised to see Harry here, eh?" Not as surprised I am to see you in the shop, Weasley," retorted Malfoy. "I suppose your parents will go hungry for a month to pay for all those." Ron went as red as Ginny. He dropped his books into the cauldron too. They started towards Malfoy, but Harry didn't. But Harry and Hermione grabbed the back of his jacket. "Ron," said Mr. Weasley, struggling over with Fred and George, "what are you doing? It's too crowded here. Let's go outside." Well, Arthur Weasley. It was Mr. Malfoy. He stood with his hands on Draco's shoulder, sneering in just the same way.